today we're talking about a very interesting topic that affects both parents and kids, and in particular, it's how that those behaviors move on from parents down to their kids and affect their lives and certainly their mental health as well. And there's a new buzz term or a TikTok hashtag, almond mom. Define that for us and tell us some of the pitfalls of being a quote unquote almond mom, particularly for those kids.
Sure. Almond Mom comes from a somewhat extreme case of celebrities where a mother who's a runway model, Yolanda Hadid, and her children who are also runway models, where Gigi during her adolescence was saying, "Mom, I don't feel good. I'm shaky. I'm hungry, whatever it is." And her mom says, "Just go eat a few almonds." Like this advice that, of course, any person who was concerned with healthy weight and diet and more than just appearance, and of course, in their case, their careers, would not advise their kid to just eat a few almonds. So that's where the term comes from. But the idea that's really shed attention is that in some ways, as parents, we can subtly or very overtly put our own anxieties and insecurities about our weight onto our children, and in turn maybe create the presence of eating disorders.
Yeah, and it's really important too to think about the way that social media is also affecting these kids today, particularly when it comes to body image. Also, and so that's also playing a factor. And when you have your parents and their behaviors also playing a role in that, it can cause a number of different mental health effects and lead to several conditions that are both physical and mental going forward. So for parents, where should they be taking those steps back and thinking about the way that their behaviors might be impacting their kids and whether or not what they're doing or what they're suggesting could potentially be dangerous or at the very least harmful to their kids' mental health.
Sure, and I think it's probably a thing that's gone on longer. It certainly predates social media. My
Sure.
own mother grew up in a time where the icons were the model Twiggy and the singer Karen Carpenter, who ultimately succumbed to her own eating disorder issues. So it's not necessarily a new thing. And I think even probably well meaning parents, something I hear all the time, even in my work, maybe a household with two siblings and one is naturally fit or thin, and maybe one carries their body weight in a different way, and a parent may allow one kid to indulge and have extra or whatever and restrict the other. Here, you can have the spaghettios and you have to have rice cakes, and the kids are left, but neither kid feels good about that situation. It feels unfair. It can cause resentment or hostility, jealousy, and it certainly, even if it was well meaning or well intended, can change how that person feels included and accepted by their family, and then that carries over to their life in the world.
Yeah, words and perceptions can really have a major impact on people, especially when it comes from family. And so, in the case of these quote unquote almond moms, these behaviors can be they might not seem that dangerous to them as they're partaking in them. They may seem like just benign comments or suggestions that are being made, especially in a family like the Hadid family, where the mother and her kids are all models and they're all in the same industry. But no, those words have severe impacts, and especially on younger people when at the most severe side of things, it can be severe depression and eating disorders, which typically among the population happen in much younger communities. Not to say that they don't happen in older populations, but 95% of eating disorders are in uh, individuals that are 25 years old or before their age 25. You look at the statistics, 1 in 7 men, 1 in 5 women experience an eating disorder by 40. 95% of those cases are in people that are under 25. So these can have severe effects on their kids, not just mentally, but physically too.
Sure, and across their lifetime, there's a good chance next week when you're eating Thanksgiving with your family that you're sitting with at least one person who at some point in their life has had disordered eating or a really poor relationship with their own body, their self-esteem, and how it relates to food. I think one thing to keep in mind, like you said, is that sometimes our comments may seem benign or maybe even helpful and are also quite hurtful. The whole Thanksgiving setting could be quite triggering, because food is all around and people are all around. So you may say to someone, "Wow, you look so great." And you may intend it as a compliment, and perhaps they've lost weight or gained weight. But depending on the nature of their eating disorder and the nature of their own attitudes, you may be drawing attention to the fact that they have an eating disorder, or saying something that might be somehow humiliating or embarrassing to them. And I think it's important to keep in mind, that like weight loss or weight gain, that eating disorders don't just come in one way or look like one kind of person, right? So you may be saying something to someone and really may have no idea that they are struggling with their own diet and health habits.
And it's interesting too because we know that these sorts of things don't just suddenly happen. It's not one comment that triggers an eating disorder. It's comments over a period of time. It's developing body image issues and self-confidence issues over the course of time. And so for individuals, especially those that are starting to emerge into their own, adolescence in their teenage years, that start to have a voice, start to have stronger opinions, at what point do you suggest that they step in when they're getting these comments from a loved one, from a parent, from a friend, from some other individual in their life that is affecting them in that way? And how do you suggest they go about addressing that with someone, especially if it's having a negative effect on their body image, on their self-esteem, and certainly on their mood?
Sure, and I think one important thing to keep in mind, like you mentioned, is that it's not just self-esteem and appearance that drives eating disorders. There's a all host of other contributing factors that may cause a person to turn to an eating disorder as a method of controlling their environment or themselves or their obsessive thoughts or whatever it may be. So sometimes the root isn't just in weight and appearance; it just happens to be the side effect of the patterns of behavior. But I think if you're getting comments, that are inappropriate, I mean, certainly advocating for yourself, and or if you're a family member that's concerned, it's not inappropriate to perhaps curiously ask someone how they're doing. Are they okay? Is there something they're struggling with? But the time and place for that should not be one during the meal or two in the presence of other people, right? You and I talk about time and space so many times, but having really good boundaries, suggesting someone eat more when there's a circle of family around, maybe some you don't see all the time, and or suggesting that someone eat less in the same environment is really inappropriate. Perhaps talking to them, if you know and you're aware that they have an eating disorder, what can we do to structure this day to make it feel comfortable for you, given that food and people are going to be all around, to be supportive for healthy choices, and just be aware of the time and space they might need if they are feeling uncomfortable. Certainly talking to other people and modeling with your own actions, right? We don't talk about people's body types in this household or at the table, or we don't insist that other people eat more or less in these settings, and that those comments don't really fly here. And taking care of your family if something were to come up, to just gently guide the conversation otherwise, and touch base with the person who has those needs in a private setting, away from the attention of everybody else.
Joined by Carrie Crawick on today's edition of the Megacast. As always, our Thursday mental health talk with Carrie Crawick. You can find more of these on civiccentertv.com/megacast, and you can get more information and get in contact with Carrie and the other mental health professionals at the Birmingham Maple Clinic on their website, birminghammaple.org, or by calling them 248-646-6659, 248-646-6659. And Carrie, as you mentioned, sort of setting those boundaries, setting those ground rules for families, particularly on Thanksgiving, a holiday that tends to be very centered around food and around socialization simultaneously. It's also a good time as you're getting back together with family, sometimes in some situations, for the first time in a year. And with where we've been at over the last several years, it could be the first time since 2019, 2018, beyond that, that these families have gotten together and seen each other in person. And so, what should people be looking out for in terms of the signs behaviorally and certainly physically that someone may be undergoing an eating disorder or be in a position where potentially they could be in danger of beginning an eating disorder based on their behavior?
Sure, there's a variety of things. So of course, like we said, extreme undereating, extreme exercise, extreme restriction, and maybe even like some things are actually kind of subtle. If you have a adolescent or young adult and they say, "I'm a vegetarian" or something, and this is a new development, but then they're only eating lettuce and celery. that might be a sign, right? That they're sort of using this cloak of like, this is how I'm restricting myself to sneak in with some very harmful behaviors. Again, frequent excusing yourself from the table while others are eating, kind of habitually moving around your food but not really eating it, just kind of, playing with the food on the plate, coming up with excuses or reasons why not to be present at the table while others are eating, obviously changes in weight gain, severe weight loss, and not carrying weight that's 100% of what you would expect a person of that age or stage. If you're sort of like 85% of what normal weight is, then you're definitely in the danger range of anorexia. Any kind of frequent bathroom trips, that might suggest a person is binging or purging or using other, medicines and laxatives, would all be signs of someone that has an eating disorder.
Again, we're joined by Carrie Krawick from the Birmingham Maple Clinic on today's edition of the Megacast. You can find more information and, of course, get in contact with them as well. birminghammaple.org, 248-646-6659, and by email, info@birminghammaple.org, info@birminghammaple.org. And for parents, especially if they're noticing these changes in behaviors in their kids and they're noticing some of these signs that we just talked about, what steps can they take to get their kid in the proper treatment that they may need, both mental health but also physical, to treat an eating disorder and change those behaviors to something that's not going to be so dangerous as an eating disorder can be for so many people.
Sure, absolutely getting treatment from a trained professional. And the treatment for eating disorders is multidisciplinary. So it covers, like you said, both the medical side, nutrition, dietitians, and frequent, weighing and kind of monitoring the nutritional content, as well as therapy and addressing the underlying causes. Certainly, families could get involved. Like you said, even well meaning parents may inadvertently exacerbate the issue with through their own anxiety or guilt or discomfort with the topic, and family therapy or individual therapy for the parents to really guide them on how to approach their child from an emotionally, rational and kind of reasonable way, and to not project any undue, um, feelings, hurt, anger, on their child, shame, those things that are really just going to exacerbate the problem. Anything that's going to become like sort of a power and control dynamic between parent and child would certainly be observed. I think, like we're talking about Thanksgiving a bit, and there's just all these harmless things that we think are seemingly harmless, but we just don't know the effect. You may get up from dinner saying, "Oh my God, I'm so huge," or "I need to go on a diet after today." And whether or not you know a person has an active eating disorder, there's probably someone at your table who has or has kind of dabbled in inappropriate eating behaviors in their lifetime. And to just be aware that those comments really don't serve anyone, and perhaps something more gentle like, "Hey, like, does anyone want to go take a walk?" And just like let's move from the dinner table and take a walk outside and just enjoy each other's company. You don't necessarily have to broadcast your own insecurities about what you've eaten to the table, because it may be funny or seem like a non-issue to you, but it may impact someone else very seriously.
Well, Carrie, we appreciate you joining us and talking more about this. It's important we have this sort of conversation because, as we've talked about throughout the last several minutes, these are things that often do go unnoticed until they are noticed, until they are a problem. And at that point, it's a lot to unpack. It is multidisciplinary, as you said, and it's a long way out from an eating disorder and to refocus some of these behaviors and reform really a relationship with food and with socialization in many of these ways. So we appreciate you telling us more about this. Anything else that we should be considering on this particular topic over the next couple weeks or as we go forward before we let you go today?
I think just having that awareness, I think there's probably lots of ways we've all grown up, again, talking about our own bodies, our own relationship with food, talking about other people's. There's so many things we've learned to kind of, consider as sort of like PC or appropriate in social settings, and perhaps our bodies have not yet risen to that level, and to just even just be monitor and aware of how do you talk and think about your own body and others. What are you hearing other people say, and is there a way to be the change you seek, right? Like, to not comment, say, even in a kind way of wow, you look great, or you've lost so much weight, but maybe refocus. What kind of compliments can you give other people that don't touch into that, and see what you notice in other people as you start to make those shifts.
It's always good to be observant, but also to err on the side of kindness. It's better to just not say some things at all than to take that risk. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.